Welcome back to Trees and Utilities. We're here live. We're sitting with Steve Kerr, not the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, the manager of forestry for FortisAlberta. Thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Great to be here.
And we're also joined by Steve Hallmark as a guest host as well, who is going to kind of help engage today's conversation around a little bit of wildfire discussion. And so I'm thrilled. You know, Steve and I are both Canadian, so I get to finally have somebody in that seat that understands my red and white. But I don't know, Steve, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're interested in learning a little bit about what you've been up to in Alberta and Edmonton and what Fortis is doing. And so a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, no, great to be on.
Yeah. Maybe tell us a little bit about, your program, your setup, given that you are situated in Canada. I don't see it as all that different, but I know there's nuances to this. So maybe just before we get into the details of some of the challenges that you're facing, talk to us a little bit about Fortis, your setup, your structure.
Yeah, sure. No, so FortisAlberta is a regulated utility here in Alberta.
There you go. Yeah.
So very much our program is standard like most other utilities. You know, we've got our capital work order programs, we've got our maintenance programs that we go through. So pruning to removals to hazard tree abatement and all that kind of stuff. Obviously a very large service territory being in Alberta, cover about half the province, servicing roughly 600,000 residents.
Okay.
About 129,000 kilometers of overhead distribution line.
Wow, that's pretty chunky. How big is your team specifically that manages all of that?
Internally, we're about 13, 14 strong, and then kind of heavily contracted out for our patrols and consents and our mechanical and herbicide work.
God. How long have you been with Fortis?
3.5 years.
Oh, you've only been there for 3.5 years. Okay, where were you prior to that?
Prior to, I was back on the tools, so I worked with a few different vendors, learning kind of the trade of working from chainsaws to aerial buckets. Got into a smaller rural electrification association, so an REA up in Canada. Joined there, did patrol consenting, kind of work planning identification, rolled into kind of program management, ended up managing the program there, and that's when I started my journey with the UVM professional development, and then kind of took a leap and joined some contractors to support, and then got on with Fortis there shortly after.
Yeah.
Steve is unique. He's number one graduate, the number one professional vegetation manager from that program. He was the first one.
From the University of Wisconsin program.
Yeah.
Wow.
SATE back in the day for me, though.
That's right.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment, then. Obviously, you sit in a pocket, in Canada, part of the Western region. Wildfires are a hot topic. Talk to us a little bit about some of those challenges that you've been facing. You guys have been tackling a lot of that over the last couple of years. Where does that all sort of sit with you at this current moment?
Yeah, it's a big topic with us right now. We've definitely been dealing with wildfire mitigation for years leading up to the events that happened last year. A lot of programs that were there to support, our mitigation tactics. But obviously now we hit the limelight in Canada, being one of the biggest wildfire years in history. So a lot of attention's been turned to the utilities. There's a lot of direction coming from south of the border as to what's been happening in California, and how's Alberta going to be starting to tackle this. So I know we're looking at a lot of different things to support what we're going to do going forward.
Yeah.
So and almost to use a term, you came on just a little over 3 years ago, and it's almost like the wildfire is baptism under fire for you as a utility, correct?
100%. Yeah.
How has that, the short time that you've been there and you've had these fires that have, it significantly impacted your system over the last 2 years? How has that changed how the utility is looking at how are we going to, moving forward? What we're doing obviously is somewhat of an effect, but you need to do a lot more. So how does that change the philosophy within your organization?
That's a good question. I know so Fortis itself, we've actually started, it used to be a wildfire task force, which is now kind of branded into our climate adaptation committee. of which it has multiple faucets of business partners that we're all looking at all of the different things going on in the wildfire environment right now. So from situational awareness to our communication to mapping, different technologies that we can integrate into our system. It's been a big bag of worms to kind of unravel, and it's actually been super interesting from my end, because as coming into Fortis, it's been a learning, but it's actually been a great learning for myself, because I'm getting to learn more about the different businesses amongst our company, meeting a lot of great people and understanding kind of what's going on and how we're all going to tackle this. But we're being heavily looked at in Alberta, as mentioned earlier, as to what we're going to do. So there's a lot of focus from all entities, from the ground up employees to senior management on what that looks like.
Yep. So it has brought on some attention to your program, but in a good kind of way.
Yep. Some attention to the program. There's a lot of discussion around what Alberta in itself is going to do. So striking up conversations with the local government on, us as an industry amongst other industry partners, what can we all do collectively to support this?
So what's changing about your veg strategies? Anything significant?
Nothing significant right now. I think that's where technology is going to come in. I think what we're learning more so is the environment's changing. We are seeing an aging forest coming out there. Our danger trees are growing in numbers. Just the sheer volume of work out there is beginning to be more and more. And, as I listen and chat with a lot of people around the conference right now, resourcing is something that's a big impact.
This must be a great place then for you to kind of meet with peer utilities and kind of share ideas. What other forums are you able to engage in that allow you to communicate with utilities and some of your colleagues in the industry?
Yeah, so Fortis Inc. actually has a veg operating group. So I get the ability that I get to meet with our sister companies and discuss, what we're all doing. We get to share information on ways that we can support each other. Joining conferences such as this, being part of local associations, so the Professional Vegetation Management Association in Alberta, the Utility Vegetation Management Association, and then also now kind of jumping on board with the UA Canadian Task Force.
I know the setup is a little bit different in Canada and in Alberta than it is like sort of in the US. Is there a state, I guess California comes to mind, but is that like the one state that you guys look closest to sort of follow what's going on and mimic any sort of strategies, processes? Who are you looking at for guidance and from a utility and from a footprint perspective?
I think you nailed it. Like, I think California is who we're looking at. We're, whenever we get into these conversations with multiple people, organizations, it's always rolls back to California and what's going on in California. How are you going to, tackle things the way that California is right now?
Yeah.
So, kind of in line with Tej's question, I mean, regulators, they look what's going on in other parts of the North America, not Canada and in North America, United States. Are the regulators, because we're seeing a lot of change going on and requirements coming from outside of California, focusing on putting in regulations to require specific actions by the utilities to mitigate for wildfire or climate change in general. Are you seeing that coming through down from the regulators in Canada as well?
It's definitely a focus. Even prior to the fires of last year, Fortis, as well as the other kind of, I call them the big three utilities in Alberta, we've all been part of a task force with the Alberta government, Wildfire. So we enter into an agreement and we plan and navigate through what we're going to do as utility partners to help mitigate our risk to wildfire ignitions. So we actually, just recently, as of last year, we created a best management practice to support kind of the work that we do in Alberta.
Yeah. So it's more so working with your regulators to help identify how you're going to attack this problem as opposed to them dictating to you how you're going to fix it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's been very open and we've had the ability to put in our feedback to support, measures that we can all work together on.
Yeah. Good. So we're seeing here in the U.S., because of an increased emphasis on, right-of-way management getting because of both wildfires as well as just reliability and in general? Are you is it becoming harder for you to get the resources to do your work in Canada as we're seeing here in the U.S.?
100%. Yeah. Resources are it's an ongoing challenge, and trying to figure out what that looks like is kind of the future outlook. Again, working with some of our industry partners to look at opportunities. Alberta is faced right now. We've got a current certification called the utility tree trimmer or utility tree worker, and that's kind of our governance over who can do work on our lines. However, we're trying to bring a kind of a broader look into that world and what we can do to grow it through Alberta trades to open up opportunities.
Steve, I really appreciate you kind of sharing, giving us a little glimpse into what's going on up in Canada. I think it's an interesting time for all utilities, and it sounds like, being the first graduate of that program, you're doing some pretty interesting stuff, and it sounds like your approach is really to observe, integrate. I've heard great things about the team that you guys have up there, so continued success, and thanks for making time today, and we look forward to kind of continuing the dialogue and keep tracking what you're doing.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good deal.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.